Given about a dozen sermons here, reflections, excuse me, and they were always on 3x5 cards. Now that I'm in my 80s, I've decided to have a little more cues for myself. One excuse that I have for being the lazy person I am is my definition of meditation. I define meditation as giving your conscious mind a stupid job to do, while your subconscious solves your problems. It allows me to rationalize things like watching YouTube or movies or pretending I'm working. So one day, a few years ago, I'm looking at a tribute album to Leonard Cohen and watching a transvestite named Anthony sing Cohen's song, "If It Be Your Will." And I find myself enraged. Now, I didn't know why. I've worked with transvestites before. I've worked with people who have changed their sexes. Not many, but a couple. I've worked with people who were cross-dressers. It just didn't make sense to me why I had that strong a reaction. But the reality of it is that if you're in my business and you react very strongly to something, you damn well better figure it out. So I watched it 10 more times. I'll explain it to you why it is that what I came up with after I've told you today's versions of a few of the best sentences ever said. I was very impressed that David found an actual recording of Gregory Norbert's song. Gregory Norbert was a Benedictine monk, a songwriter, guitar player, who was at the Western Priory in the 70s and 80s. And I loved watching him play the songs that he sang along with the other Benedictine monks. After he left the monastery, he got married and had a family. But the song and the line which David played is, "All I ask of you is forever to remember me as loving you." In the song, it's, "All I ask of you is forever to remember me as loving you." That's a good loop. It really defines the meaning of love, as far as I'm concerned. It guides my way of relating to my clients. What is love? Love is wanting what's best for the other person, even if it's not what's best for you, as long as you stay away from martyrdom. So that's one of the 6 sentences. The second one I thought of was done by Will Rogers, and this one has created a certain amount of inner turmoil for me, but again, it's something I had to work out. Will Rogers said, "I never met a man I didn't like." Now, I've met a lot of men I didn't like. I also have a lot of problems because it should obviously be changed with the modern pronouns to a person I didn't like. I have to say, I did love Scott Adams Dilbert until he went off the rail into ultra-right-wing land. But my favorite cartoon of his is aliens come from another planet and arrive on Earth and say, "We're going to take over this Earth, take us to your leader," and all the rest of that normal stuff. And they go to someone and that person says, "That's okay, but what pronouns do you use?" After which they return to their spaceship and say, "Forget about this planet, it's already taken over." I've always believed there's no part of anybody that's not a part of me. And it's my job to get in touch with a part of me that could say or do anything that any client has ever said or done. Now, as David pointed out, I've worked with all kinds of adjudicated criminals, mental patients, normal people, if there are any such. But I believe that my success as a shrink is partly because I blame myself if I can't find that part of me that could do anything any client of mine has done. So in order for me to like anyone I'm talking to, I have to learn to love that person, as Greg defines it in his sentence. Now, the concept of love has undergone an enormous amount of confusion, let's say. But I gave you my definition of it. The truth is that I'm interested in loving my clients to the degree of understanding exactly what they think is important to them, how they feel, what they want. Those things are, from my point of view, the most important thing. Now that doesn't mean that I like them, and there are parts of myself that I don't like either. Too bad. I've got to learn to love them. The person that did most of the work in this area is a woman named Marsha Linehan, who developed dialectical behavioral therapy. But her basic concept was, you got to really learn to love the different parts of yourself, as well as in order for you to help other people. Next sentence. This is done by a cartoonist who, from my point of view, and for many others, was the best cartoonist who ever lived. His name was Walt Kelly. He wrote the Pogo comic strip from the late 1940s up until the 1970s, or when he died. We have met the enemy, and he is us. Pronoun problems again, sorry about that. Kelly was an extraordinarily brilliant man. When people say to me, well, I don't understand, I can't stand Pogo, is what they say. And what I say to them is, I'm not sure you understand Pogo. But in the 1950s, and there are some of us here who remember that time, there was a guy named McCarthy who did some pretty big damage to an awful lot of people, many of them artists. He ran the House Un-American Activities Committee, and his whole thing was, are you a communist? Are you now, or have you ever been? If you're pink, if you're red or even pink, I don't want anything to do with you, get out of this country. Everybody was afraid of McCarthy, just about. Walt Kelly, in his comic strip, developed a character, a wildcat, whom he named Simple J. Malarkey. Simple J. Malarkey looked exactly like McCarthy. To the degree that the comic strip was dropped from some papers, it was put on the editorial page in others. It was a major embarrassment, and I think contributed to McCarthy's winding up getting into the trouble that he did. It turned out he was a drunk and he had a lot of other problems. From my point of view, the whole concept of meeting the enemy and he is us is the key to any success that I've had in my practice. In the 1972 book that Pogo was written, that Kelly is talking about, it was called We Have Met the Enemy and He Is Us. And Pogo, is a possum, by the way, is going through a dump, and he is complaining about how thoughtless people are who jettison recyclable stuff when he finds a towel that has his name on it. The same principle of empathic introversion and that's what I call it, is required to understand how I'm capable of doing anything anyone else is capable of. I did give a reflection here about 20 years ago that was titled, "No Better Than Hitler, No Worse Than Jesus." And that was the concept. There's no part of me that's any better than Hitler and no part of me that's any worse than Jesus. The name of the game is getting to know those parts of me and not necessarily acting on the ones that can hurt other people, especially unnecessarily. Now we get to my mentor. My mentor is a guy named Milton Erickson. Milton Erickson, very interesting character. He became an MD. I suppose some would consider him a psychiatrist. Most people considered him the best hypnotist who ever lived. The truth is that he said several things, but his original experience was as a teenager when he got polio. And he was totally paralyzed from the nose down in what they called an iron lung. So he's in a hospital for most of that time, and he's watching people. His brain is working, his mind is working, but he can't talk, and everything is being taken care of otherwise. And when he was asked afterwards, what was going on in your mind? He said, well, first I noticed the difference between what people said and what they did. And then I noticed the difference between what they said and what they thought they were saying and what they did. And then I noticed the difference between what they said and what they thought they were saying and what they did and what they thought they were doing. People were afraid to walk into the same room with him. He could hypnotize them like that. The simple reality is that I had enormous trouble with one of his 4 principles. The other 3 I didn't have any trouble with. By the way, the other 3 were basically everyone has positive intentions, we all have unknown internal resources, and change is inevitable. No problem with any of those. Here's the one I had a problem with. Everyone is doing the best they can. Everyone is doing the best they can? How can someone who's hurting or killing people believe they're doing the best they can? And I'm meeting with some of these people. Rapists, mass murderers, people who have been classified all kinds of DSM categories. And I was just trying to figure out, how do I live with that? And how can I really help people who have done things like that? Number 5. René Descartes. Most of you probably have heard this one, but I don't want to put Descartes in front of the horse. I think, therefore I am. Now that one helped me a lot. Because if you think you're doing the best you can, and you find out you're not, you might consider changing your behavior. In the early 1970s, I was a fledgling shrink working at what is now HCRS, was then health care, and it was now Mental Health Services of Southeastern Vermont. And I do have a little bit of a legal background. Both my parents met at Columbia Law School. 2 of my 3 kids are lawyers. I was testifying and probably have testified on more cases than any other shrink in Vermont. And I got a call from a lawyer saying, I've got a guy who murdered a teenage girl, and he wants someone to evaluate him because he can't figure out why he did it. And I said, oh yeah, sure. You want an expert witness to get him a lesser sentence. And he said, no, this guy's sign anything you want. He really isn't sleeping at night. He really doesn't understand why he killed this girl. So I took the challenge. Talked to the guy, he's a big guy, highly masculine. I don't know what to call him. One of the joys of being a shrink is you get to change people's names when you report about them. So let's call him Bruce. That'll come from Bruce Jenner, maybe. And that'll give you a hint here. And let's call his last name He-Man, Bruce He-Man. So Bruce He-Man comes to see me. I give him a bunch of tests. His background is kind of interesting. He was a twin, and his twin was a girl, and she did very well in school. He did very badly. When he was 8 years old, his mother started having a relationship with another man and divorced her husband, his father, and his father wound up working 2 jobs to pay the child support. And it took me a while, and the way I figure things out is by walking around the pool table, as Ann can tell you, and bouncing the balls around and saying, well, if that idea is right, the 4 will go on the side, and I'll get position on and make the 7 in the corner. So after banging the balls around for a while, I got together with this guy and I said, okay, I think I know why you killed her, but let me get the story here. Your girlfriend had left you. You were driving around in your pickup truck, drinking a lot of beer, and you picked up a couple of teenage girls. You dropped one of them off at her house. The other one you took to Lover's Lane, tried to have a relationship with her, and it did not work because she was too drunk and you were too drunk. They said you killed her after having a few beers. You came back and strangled her, and you killed her for one reason, because you didn't want to have a thought. And he looked at me and I said, the thought was that you wish you were a girl. And he turned white. I never understood what that meant, blanching. But he actually turned white. He said, my God, that's why I've been having those dreams. What dreams? I dreamed I was going to Sweden and had a sex change operation. He had never thought of that before, had never dreamed of that before, according to him. Now let's get to Anthony. Why was I so furious? I'm watching a guy sing a song that was written by Leonard Cohen, specifically as a prayer. If it be your will, I'll do whatever you want me to do. But he was singing it as a man and moving as a woman and dressed as a woman. And I realized that either this guy was the best actor I'd ever seen, or he had been exposed to many of the things that I was exposed to, a very, very powerful, very strong, very controlling mother. And he reacted in exactly the opposite way to how I reacted. Now, this is the 1950s. I started watching Steve McQueen movies. I started watching Paul Newman movies, practicing acting like a real man. Learned how to light a match with my fingers. Practiced all of those highly hyper-masculine movements. And this guy, instead of becoming more and more of a he-man, became more and more a female. He was my shadow. I could have been him just as easily as I could have become who I became. So, let's go to Milton Erickson. Everyone is doing the best they can. Bruce He-Man was doing the best he could in his mind, but he did it to prevent himself from having a thought. So let's change Milton Erickson's statement to everyone thinks they're doing the best they can. If I think I'm doing the best I can, and I find out that I'm not, I need to change. Haven't we all said and done things that hurt others or ourselves unnecessarily? Don't we wish we knew then that the parts of ourselves that we wanted to hide weren't so bad? Wouldn't we all do better today and tomorrow if we knew that we thought we were doing the best we could at the time? Because probably we did think we were doing the best we could at the time. It just wasn't the best we could do. Judge yourself by how you think now. Thank you.